Right, let me go across to our guests at this point. We're now joined by Govt Moda, partner and head of the energy sector vertical at EY, and Prashant Vasisht, who is senior vice president of ICRA. Prashant, what would be your estimate on the spike in India's crude oil bill if we had to increase imports from the United States and reduce our reliance on Russian crude?
Parikshit, if we were to buy market price crude in place of the discounted Russian crude, our estimate is that the import bill would rise by less than 2%, because as it is now, the discounts are quite low, in just about $2.5 to $3 per barrel.
And Gaurav, your own estimate?
Prashant, I think there are three aspects to take into account here before we come to a number. Aspect one is that India's crude imports are fairly diversified now. We import from South America, the US itself, as well as other geographies all over the world. So that diversified sources helps us balance our averages. Second, most important aspect also is that the crude prices last year were averaging $75 a barrel. They went down to $60. Now they're $65, $66. So it's not like the crude pricing has gone completely out of whack in the market. Third aspect also is that India has been preparing for these kind of situations, not just now, but over the past several years, where we've increased our domestic inventories of crude. All PSUs are doing that. And we have strategic reserves and caverns where we store. So the question is not necessarily how much will be the direct impact on India's buying pricing, but more in terms of how we can stabilize and manage the market.
Right. Now let me ask you, what would be India's options, Prashant, if we had to stop import of Russian crude oil in case the United States imposes sanctions on Russia and imposes secondary sanctions on countries like India and China if they were to purchase Russian oil?
Right. So, see, the first thing that we need to remember is that prior to 2022, our imports of Russian crude were in any case quite low, at less than 2%. We are also quite close to the Middle East or Gulf region, which is one of the biggest exporters of crude. So we are well served by that, by the crude that we can source from the Middle East. Besides that, there are several other options, US being one, then there are a host of African countries, Algeria, Nigeria, and so on. So our crude basket has been fairly diversified, and we can obviously go back to some of these sources for replacing the Russian crude.
Right. And Gaurav, when it comes to getting a comparable oil bargain, currently the reason why we're buying from Russia, and this is right now, the Russian crude is the biggest in India's crude import basket. Would it be possible for us to get comparable prices anywhere in the world, be it Africa, be it West Africa or the Middle East?
Rishit, I would like to believe in the diktat that customer is always right. And India is the customer here. So this, in fact, is an opportunity for the selling countries to vie for more share of the Indian market if there is a replacement that's coming up. So I would anticipate that there could be further negotiations and bargain on the table for multiple countries to look at the Indian market. And as I said, we've been doing business with many of them. There are enough options on the table.
Right. Prashant, when it comes to India's options, if there were sanctions, for example, Donald Trump is saying that there could be 500% tariffs on countries which buy Russian energy, countries like India and China. If that were to happen, would India have to stop imports from Russia altogether, or it can bring it down to say something like 10 to 15% or 20% and increase imports from countries like United States, Middle East, West Africa?
If there is a very definitive big sanction tariff then possibly India could reduce the proportion of the Russian crude. But what is also pertinent to note is that in case the Russian crude is, entirely priced out of the market because of sanctions or whatever reason, that accounts for about 7% of the global crude and petroleum products consumption. So where will the prices go? So that is the other factor. But yeah, in case we decide as a country to cut down the crude, there are several other options as well.
There are other options as well. If I can get you in, Gaurav, once again. Now, India has been diversifying its crude import basket. Overall, what kind of pressure would India be in terms of Russian crude oil being wiped out from the market, India not being allowed to buy Russian oil altogether?
If you look at the last 10 years or 15 years or 20 years average, we bought enough crude from so many countries. The percentage of crude sometimes has gone much higher from West Asia, sometimes from South America, even Africa. So it's not that, we've not been in these kind of situations. Even if one portion of the crude supplies get completely wiped out, if at all, there are enough options in the market for us to keep feeding in the crude requirements. Having said that, Parikshit, what I would like to bring to the table is that India still imports more than 80%. At some point, it even got to 85-86% of the crude requirements. In doing that, we are still hitting a very large import bill. Having said that, the current government, Honorable Prime Minister and even the MOPNG Minister are opening up the Indian markets for much more exploration and development activities for extracting oil from India's own oceans, whether it's the Bay of Bengal side or the Arabian Sea side. So I in fact see an opportunity which could be a win-win, where a number of the Indian Bay of Bengal areas have been opened up from no-go zones to open ENP zones, where there is opportunity for US and India to in fact collaborate to search and extract that oil, which may be beneficial for both markets. So this could actually be an opportune time to do both, not just thinking short term, that how do we diversify and take care of our immediate needs, but also to really extend hands with each other and do much more together.
Right. Prashant, if I were to ask you, now we've been learning from sources that India's crude oil and energy imports from US have more than doubled in FY26, and Indian companies are likely to increase their crude oil imports from the United States by 150% year on year in FY26. If we speak about this full fiscal, what do you think would be the value of our imports from the United States? At the start of this year, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri had said in February that India is likely to purchase $25 billion worth of oil and gas from the US. Would there be any estimate that you may have as to how we may finish the entire year in terms of our purchases from the US?
So yeah, certainly to reduce the budget deficit, to reduce the trade imbalance or the surplus that we enjoy with US, possibly one of the levers is to increase the energy purchases from them, including LNG and crude. I would not be able to pull out a number, but currently we are at about 6 to 8%, and that number can significantly increase. Additionally, a lot of our oil and gas companies are also looking at long-term LNG, and as we speak, US, there are about 6 to 7 projects that are coming up in the US. And US LNG being Henry Hub priced, is quite attractive vis-a-vis the Brent priced LNG these days. So a lot of our companies are seriously looking at LNG deals with US companies also.
Right. What happens to the long-term contracts with Russian entities? If I were to put that question to Gaurav, what happens to that in the wake of sanctions? This month we have seen a drop in imports from Russia, but it's still quite high, in the range of 35 to 36%. Going forward, what will happen to the long-term contracts if by Friday Donald Trump does announce those secondary sanctions?
Rishi, it's difficult to comment on long-term contracts which are one-on-one, government to government, or company to company on current basis. We'll have to get into details on evaluating what are the inbuilt penalties for such long-term contracts, or what are the flexibilities in providing volumes on such long-term contracts, immediate versus near future. So it may be a question of playing the balancing act on long-term contracts wherever applicable, but difficult to comment directly at the moment. Having said that, Parishit, what I would add is that this mutual win-win, which even Prashant spoke about, is genuinely possible in the energy sector for US and India. I spoke about the E&P aspect already. Prashant spoke about the gas, the LNG aspect. There is also the third aspect around renewables, electric vehicles, exchange of technology, and market access to all of that. And there is a fourth angle as well, where India is growing in terms of its need for data centers and data available within our national sovereignty. Number of US technology majors are buying that market into India. So I think there are multiple options on the table if we look at it as an energy win-win versus just oil in particular. There is enough to play around with.
Right. Thank you very much, Gaurav Moda and Prashant, for joining us. So clearly an uncertain situation, but the answer would be diversification of crude imports, which India would be doing over the next few months. So we will have more long-term contracts with the US, but that doesn't mean the US can be the only supplier. We will have to ramp up significantly with the Middle East, from West Africa and other nations as well. We're taking a short break, but coming up, Vietnamese EV maker VinFast has opened its first assembly plant in Tamil Nadu. A special conversation with Pham San Chao,